And we just hit the live. This is Sage session number 12. I'm Kevin. Jake and Hannah say hi from Hawaii,
Hello from Hawaii. I'm Jake.
Aloha, I'm Hannah.
where I always want to mention the weather that's always changing here, but you guys just have perfect weather pretty much all the time.
Pretty
Pretty
much.
consistent. Yeah.
This session is, I guess we could just title it as talking about reactivity.
Yes.
Okay. I see folks are on right now. If somebody will let me know you can see and hear both all of us, we'll get rolling. My brother Jared, who's always been, I think he's been here for everyone. He won't be today. He has a conflicting. I think he has some broadcast he's doing, so we'll miss him.
Yes, we will miss you. I always appreciate his
I
comments.
do too.
All right, Ralph says yes, can hear. Christy says aloha. Can hear us both.
Aloha.
All right, Judy can see and hear us. Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you. Well, we ready to roll?
We are.
All right. So yeah, thanks for joining us. This is Sage session 12. 12th time we've come together and talked about some of the components of Sage, the things that I grapple with myself and end up talking with others, my family, friends, my audience. I'm grateful. And this one, Jake had written a blog, and state where they can find that again. I need to always have this
That's on Substack. So
right.
Substack Jake Eagle, or the title of my Substack is The Unorthodox Therapist.
This Sunday's, which would have been October 5th, you wrote one on reactivity. And I've been pondering it today and wanted to ask you to clarify then, why do we react? And is it fair to go ahead and juxtapose that against respond to begin with?
Yeah, that's how we frame it, that
Okay.
a response is intentional, deliberate, a choice, as opposed to a reaction, which is when we're on autopilot and we just behave in ways we may not feel good about. And we do it before we even really think about it. Something happens and we find ourselves in reaction mode. And this happens in little ways. We get an email and we feel our heart rate go up because something in that message felt we threatened ourselves or we disappointed ourselves. And often what we do is we respond before we think about it, and then things start to escalate and get out of control.
React.
We react. Yeah.
With with that, I feel I've come a long way. I don't know how far it is, but in being aware of my reactions. So today, do I feel far less reactive emotionally than I did in the past? I'm not sure I know how to answer that because I still can feel it. I hope that I'm just immediately aware and then I don't act with that reaction. But I've talked a lot about how I'll look at things and go, okay, how would secure Kevin react? But as you were just talking a second ago, the thing I thought about is asking with that reaction. Granted that it's not physical, it's not a bear jumping out of the woods or somebody robbing me at the bank or whatever, that this is some psychological aspect for me to ask what is really at risk. That's what I found myself pondering this morning before coming on here, is considering what is at risk. And I'll just throw that to you. But I found myself thinking about how I would say culturally that that I see an exaggeration of the risk.
An exaggeration in our culture. That is that what you mean?
Yeah, that we look at things, and when somebody differs with our political position or our belief in XY, we have gotten, it feels like we've gotten ourselves to thinking there it's really at risk. The fact that that person thinks X is going to result in them voting this way, and it's going to be war. So it is it is a big deal. What feels at risk? But now that still is separated from, do I react or can I look for a constructive response? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes way back in time in terms of our development to an illusion that we build from a fairly young age where we get an idea. I get an idea of who I am. And if Hannah likes me, that adds to my sense of I'm okay. And if I do well in school, that adds to my sense of I'm smart. And if I get accolades from other people, I start to build this sense of identity that I'm okay. Then someone comes along and they say something that contradicts that message. I perceive it as a challenge or a threat to who I thought I was.
Okay.
And then I scare myself or I upset myself and I feel the need to defend myself. But the problem is that the idea I built of myself is false. It's an illusion. It's not real because I created something that feels fixed and permanent, like I can carry with me. This is who I am, as opposed to recognizing that my identity, my sense of who I am, is just continuously developing and evolving and expanding. And certain things that I used to think about who I am, I no longer think are true, and things that I didn't think would ever be true, I now believe actually are part of who I am. And as long as we hold on to this fixed idea, this is who I am, and somebody comes along and they challenge that, I'm going to threaten myself. And so this has very deep roots.
Well, and that's you guys have been privy to my story and the depth to which I threatened myself when not everyone, but when certain people, like my former wife especially, would say something that threatened the attachment that I had about my identity, the perspective that I wanted to be held in. I threatened myself to. To me, it feels like an incredibly exaggerated manner, and I just didn't. I so disoriented myself by doing that because I didn't feel like I was an insecure person. I felt like I was confident, capable, had faith in myself, all this, and yet started to recognize that, oh my gosh, I am, I didn't even, and I was aware of that. I don't even understand the risk. I don't know why I am terrifying myself, but I am. And I feel like people, I so interest myself in that where we feel like, oh, we're doing okay. And yet we have some areas or some people or some circumstances that we know, oh my gosh, I really get flipped upside down with that.
I,
Why?
I flip myself
I
upside down.
flip myself upside down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in your case, you had built this really almost mythical story, you and your ex-wife having these seven biological kids and two adopted kids, and you built this home to accommodate everyone. And it was really I would say probably a big part of your identity. And then when things didn't go well with you and your ex-wife, it really challenges that
Mm.
mythical story,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
That's, yeah, just the ideal, the picture, the story. I have a story. Well, we're back to the essence of Sage that I was not experiencing reality. I was experiencing my interpretation. When my interpretation was not upheld, that's probably what I threatened myself with most because that was what I had attached to or stood my identity on. So we're back to that. What is at risk? I'd be interested for those who are listening right now, what your experience has been with feeling at risk from something that is again not of a physical nature, but a psychological aspect in regards to you that you've struggled with in the past or struggle with now. We've had some people in past sessions we've done here live talk about struggles they had primarily sounds like with relationships. And I know from your testimony with working with couples in this concept for the past decades that it seems like your testimony is the most acute area of this problem was with couples specifically.
Yeah, I think that in general, couples and particularly couples, but also very close friendships, when I depend on Hannah seeing me in a certain way, and that way that she sees me reinforces me feeling good about myself. And then for some reason she deviates. She expresses that she sees me in a different light. Then I have a tendency to threaten myself, because what are the implications of that? What are the implications of this person that I'm so close to and attached to? What are the implications when that person's critical of me? And as we all know, our minds can take off. Well, if she's unhappy with me, where does that go? What if this continues? And all of a sudden, I find myself, I scare myself and upset myself. Now, the sooner we break that, which is part of what S.A.G.E allows us to do, the sooner we break that cycle by paradoxically taking responsibility for how I feel, taking back from my partner my power, my agency. The minute I do that, I start to open my mind to different possibilities, and I think about the whole situation in a different way. Because I don't feel like I'm the victim and she's the perpetrator. She's scaring me. She's threatening me. She's doing something to me. I realize she's a different person. She's over there having her experience. She's telling me about herself. She's not telling me about me. And now I can be curious. And all of a sudden, you notice how space opens up. And even as I talk this way, you may notice that I'll just naturally slow down when I start thinking in these terms. I'm creating room and space. And that gives me the ability to respond, hopefully in a mature and thoughtful way.
And this is that self-containment that S.A.G.E OS3 allows us to get into. And we can't see it when we're in OS2. We can't grasp it or experience it until we start practicing the language. That's really the tool to step into OS3.
We can't grasp ourselves or
Right.
experience myself, right?
Exactly.
In OS2,
Right.
until we take that step. And my perception of you is you've always been very comfortable being self-contained. When you used to be a serious student of Zen, I would perceive that as a very high level of self-containment, hours spent in meditation and not really interacting with other people a whole lot. And you comforted yourself with that,
I
right?
did.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I want to say you connected with yourself. I'm stuck on that word. You connected with yourself, and I, on my journey, never, never really did until now. Uh, I had said, what's at risk? Jake, a second ago, you said, what are the implications? And I look back on childhood and I wanted dad's approval. The implications were not having his approval. I don't know what would have been at risk if I didn't dance the right way. I don't think he would have beat me. He's a good guy. I perceive him as a great guy. I probably never gave him the chance. I towed the line. I wanted his approval, and I took that on into life. We talked last week, I think, about the trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, the new and fawn. And in fawning, which I resonate with, having someone's disapproval, that was that implication alone. I don't know that I ever unpacked. And what does that mean? Why is that so bad? I just was never conscious of that until now.
But do you feel that you got a degree of approval from your dad?
Hmm.
Yeah. So this is a really nice example in my mind, because you're framing it as what would have been the blame, what would have been the downside, and you're saying I can't really imagine what my dad would have done. He wouldn't have beat me, I don't think. But what you were getting is you were feeding yourself with some degree of praise,
Yeah.
some degree of approval and appreciation from your dad. So this is why we say that in the orientation of SAGE, we try to reduce both praise and blame, because when we're getting praise from someone, I'm still getting my good vibes based on how another person sees me, based on what they tell me about me, which feels great. I love that. But the risk I run is, what if they stop? What if I say the wrong thing and they pull away? What if they withdraw their praise? And so that's the flip side. It's not just being concerned about the criticism or the blame. It's also losing the praise, losing the respect, the love.
Yeah, I took that. Kevin, you are mature. You are
Yeah.
intellectual. You talk with the adults while everybody else is, the kids are with the kids, and you are this. And I just agreed. Okay.
Yeah.
Forrest Gump. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Good
what I'll
stuff.
do. And I took that in and then found a spouse that gave me that as well, or I could work to earn that from. And I kept my fix, kept getting addicted. I was addicted to my fix. And then when I didn't get it, when I couldn't control it or influence it to the degree that I had, that's I damaged myself. Uh, yeah, I want to hit. We'll go back a minute ago. Mary said she questioned. So Jake, we were talking about um, the story that I had with my family and if that got jeopardized, and you referred to it as a mythical story. She said I confused myself. Kevin is the dad. He gave life to his kid's life. I don't visualize or understand how Jake sees Kevin as living under an illusion. Please expand.
So the illusion I'm referring to is that Kevin thought that the story he created, having these kids and adopting kids and creating this whole home, that defined who he was, that's Kevin Miller. And what I'm saying is that those are aspects of his story, and he has placed great value on those. But at the same time, there's more to his story than that. And if something happened, for example, I'm making this up, but let's say that he had a disagreement with his ex-wife, and it was, you know, uh, significant, then that threatens that story, that idea of who he is. If he didn't attach to it so strongly, then he could be curious. He could go, well, what does this mean? And maybe I am not seeing the full picture of who I am.
Maybe I need to change something.
Yeah, maybe the story as I've been telling it isn't accurate. It's not a reflection of what's really going on. So the only way I can know that is when I listen to this other person tell me her experience of what's going on. Well, I can't do that if I'm so attached to my idea about who I am that I can't listen to her perspective without threatening myself. So when I say an illusion, I don't mean that what Kevin thought about himself wasn't true. I think it was accurate. He did have all those kids. He did create this life, but it's
There's,
certainly not the whole story.
there's a fragility in that, where he, um, if that image of himself is threatened, then there's a fragileness and um, a inability to hold that confidence or to even have curiosity about what's being said.
Yes. Yeah, it was a lot of Mary. I don't know if everything that I did, what I wouldn't have, still have done. I wouldn't have done as much. I was an overdoer in my perspective, but the spirit underneath it, I was working so hard at holding it all up in the story that I wanted it to be, that I think so much of it was not necessary. And for me, my stories, I did it till I couldn't. I just kind of came to a wall and realized I'm bitter, I'm tired. And then by that point, I I didn't deal with it initially healthfully, and caused, I think, a lot of collateral damage that could have been avoided. Um, but thank you for the question. I see you just did another one, but Lynn she said, what's at risk from my viewpoint is the connection between me and another. That's what feels at risk.
Yes, and then the question I ask is, what is the quality of that connection if you are in reaction? In other words, that suggests to me that the quality of the connection is a little bit fragile. It's not really robust. There's not room for differences and disagreement and uh, being challenged. So, what would it take for you to maintain a strong connection with someone and have that connection exist even during times where you have different points of view or where you disagree about something or where there is tension? What would have to change for you to be able to hold that connection without anxiety, without making yourself anxious?
I'll throw a, not a question, or I have there's some pithy quotes out there, but they're along the lines of, I'm going to paraphrase dramatically, but in being in health, in your own identity, being at peace, there's going to have to be some people who may not think that you're the best thing ever. Some people who, and you got to allow that. Okay, I question a lot of these conclusive statements. I have, Lynn, within that, I have let that play out some, even as an exercise, to have somebody. Here's an example. Back when I was first podcasting, and I had some of my biggest podcasting years as far as listenership, so, some of the early days. And when I would get negative reviews, or back when I blogged, and when I would get some or negative feedback, I I perceive myself as a master. I'd contact with the person, and I'd connect, and I'd ask questions, and I'd bring them around circle. I'd have people apologize eventually. But my point being, the effort that I made to get them back in my good graces, I astound myself with, as opposed to the last few years. And I'll say going through a divorce usually involves friends, family, and letting people accuse with a story that I can show you proof that that's, not really correct, and just letting it ride and go, it's a story that they chose. They didn't ask me to correct it, and I'm going to let it ride and just practice. Can I actually survive? Well, I wake up the next morning with somebody who's upset with me. Son of a gun. I keep waking up, and I have some people who I haven't made the effort to defend myself. So I'm not going to justify all that. That's my journey. It's my little practice. I'm playing with it now. I wish I had understood that a long time ago and not made some of the efforts that I did and let people. And I have seen some incredible turnarounds. I've got two kid stories I won't go into, where they had some hard feelings and I let them. And then I saw them come back, and my connection with those two kids may be the strongest two kid connections I have right now. And I'm watching that with amazement, going, oh my goodness. I and I didn't make an effort. I let it ride. Now, that may not always be the story. I may have some people where I let it ride, don't defend myself, and they decide they don't like me anymore. Okay.
There's something, from my point of view, very respectful in what you're saying about allowing the other person to go through their process. And had you reacted early in the interaction where one of the kids comes and goes, "Hey, Dad, I'm really unhappy with you," or whatever they say, had you reacted early, in a way, it's as if you deny the child from having whatever their experience is and being able to express their experience, hopefully in a mature way.
Yeah.
Uh, and that takes the two of you down a path that to me has got a great deal more uh, significance and meaningful connection, instead of limiting ourselves, which happens when I react. If I react to Hannah and I try to stop her from expressing something that's critical of me, I'm really limiting the depth of our relating. Now, all of this is much easier to do when we're interacting with people who are mature and they say things using subjective language, the language of personal agency. That's kind of the point, is that when we change our language, we change this entire dynamic. And I shift myself from reacting to slowing down, being more thoughtful, recognizing the other person has different perspective than I do. And now I can respond in a much more thoughtful way.
Okay, I have a question for you two. Lynn, based on what you said about concern about the connection between you and another, and honestly, Mary, with what you shared, even here on the shows, I'm going to ponder whether, like myself, you often feel and take responsibility for relationships. I did a lot. So help me. How would you frame that, Jake and Hannah, of going, okay, you're not responsible, Jake, for Hannah's feelings. You don't take over responsibility for the relationship. You do care. Help reconcile the difference.
Well, when I start to take responsibility for how you're feeling, then I start to be controlling. I have an agenda to make Hannah feel a certain way. And when I do that, although maybe a good intention and some of it may actually even feel good to her, I'm really inhibiting uh, Hannah from being fully herself.
Hmm.
And I'm clouding the picture as soon as I do that versus taking a half a step back. And this is where Hannah brought up the word before about being self contained. When we're self contained, we take a half a step back, we watch the other person, and we see that they are who they are. They are experiencing what they're experiencing. That's their way of being in this moment. It's not a static snapshot, but it's their way of being in this moment. And
Hmm.
When
if
I'm when I am self-contained, I don't threaten myself with the other. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't threaten yourself. I'm gonna pair that though with not pair it, but you don't threaten yourself if it's with Jake or somebody that you do respect and care about. You do care, but you're not going to threaten yourself. So
Mhm.
you're going to be. I see you guys, and then you're curious. Is that the best
Right.
response?
Exactly.
curious and care, as you said. So if Hannah points out that there's a behavior I do and she upsets herself with the behavior, then I'm going to seriously look at changing my behavior, not because she's telling me to, but because she's saying, when I experience you in this way, I make myself very anxious or upset. Well, geez, I don't want her to do that. I don't want to be a stimulus that she uses to make herself unhappy. So I very likely will change a behavior unless there's some reason why I feel like I need to continue with that behavior. And then that's going to be a conversation. We're going to try to sort that out.
Okay, Mary, I see your what you said there, and I want to address that real quick though. With this, back to what I don't know. How, I can't remember how you said it, Jake. It was something along in my head. I heard test not testing, vetting the relationship, the health of it by allowing to see how the person responds. Me not trying to control or influence it. If I That has been part of my journey now. If I do receive an accusation, a blame, a criticism, I am practicing going, okay, um, and not defending. And right now, I'm just kind of sitting there and letting the person have, in my story, the perspective to ask me. They can ask me about it. They can just give the statement, the feeling, their interpretation that they may present as fact and be done. And if they're done, I'm feeling like I disappoint myself that our relationship um, is lacking something to where they wouldn't ask me my side. And if they don't, right now my practice is then I'll just let it set. If they do, and I'm really aware when someone does say, "Gosh, this is what I was told, or what I heard, or what I saw. Can you tell me about that?" I can absolutely tell you my story. I got a story. So you heard a story? I got a story. You'd like to hear it, and then you get to make your own story.
You see, and to me, this is the basis of a great relationship where when we find someone to connect with and that person is reasonably healthy, they have a lot of emotional maturity, everything becomes so much easier because, as in the story Kevin just told, he doesn't have to step in and intervene. He doesn't have to try to get the person to be different than they are. That they have that curiosity about who he is and why he behaves the way he behaves. That just makes relating so much easier and more fun. And without that, I think that it's much more likely we're going to either try to control the other person and or threaten ourselves with the other person. So for those on the call who are, looking to create healthy relationships, I encourage you to look at the other person's health and well-being as one of the criteria. Now, some of us are already in relationships with people who are immature and they're not particularly healthy. In those situations, we complicate ourselves because we're choosing to interact with somebody who doesn't have maybe the willingness or the understanding to take responsibility for him or herself.
Our topic today is reactivity, and we've ended up into relationships. Are you guys good to go with that? Because there's a couple here that, in a lot of ways, just are in reference to you guys, you two, your
Sure, we can
relationship.
go with it as long as as long as we come back and sort of make sure we address any questions people have about reactivity. But it's all
Okay.
connected.
Okay. Well, then I've got two here. Yeah. Yasmin, I believe I see yours as well, but let me hit Mary's first. Mary says, in response to something you said a minute ago, withdrawing connection does, and she has in quote, hurt. And Mary, you know the language, so you hurt yourself. When I am under the illusion that agreement is required to have connection, addicted to praise, damaged my identity as it fed a bad diet of pride. Um, you guys addressed that. I just wanted to say, Mary, that agreement is required to have connection. That I bought that illusion as a child. That's what I saw with my parents, and I took that till majority of my life. I didn't understand. I had no awareness of anything other than that full agreement, complete alignment, parallel lives, specifically in marriage, was required to have connection. But I did that to I think my kids would testify that that's what they experienced with me, at least in the early years, especially. I got better, I think they would say. But man, I wanted to share. I've got compassion for that perspective because man, did I walk under that umbrella for majority of my life.
Yeah, in our early years, I think we strove for agreement because we comforted ourselves when we found ourselves in agreement. And then over the years, I interest myself in terms of what's happened, which is when we don't agree and we stay connected. I find that to be almost more,
Connecting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like we don't have to agree. We can still just love the heck out of each other and be curious that we see the world in different ways.
I mean, I do want to. How can we address? We talk a lot. I use the word resonance, and we use that a lot with each other. I mean, I thrill myself when I come into resonance with someone else, like Jake and Hannah. I mean, we have been, I'll call it an intimate relationship. I mean, almost daily interaction for, I don't know, a year and a half now. Primarily, I confirm myself when I have this thought and this feeling and I share it, and you go, absolutely. Um, I don't know what the percentage is of times where you don't, don't resonate with that. And we do that with each other as well. But I just want to recognize, gosh, I thrill myself when there is that resonance, when there is that agreement. But if that's the foundation, if on the other side it's threat, and that I don't feel with you guys. If you don't agree, I am authentically curious. I'll say that that's still, I still feel relatively new with that. I kind of watch that with, and I enjoy myself watching that going, huh. So I was in my trance about XYZ and they didn't jump on board and pat my back with that one. I'm curious though, why? And yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's a huge part of the strength of our connection. And you said, I don't know what percentage of the time we're sort of in agreement, and it's actually it's 89% of the time, but 11% of the time we're not. And the interesting thing is, it's that 11% where I think we're strengthening our bond with you, because that's where you don't react.
Hmm.
I perceive you as being curious, and then we go deeper
Yeah.
as opposed to separating.
Yeah, I still feel new in that and greatly appreciate it. Okay. Yasmin, I hope I'm saying that right. Jake and Hannah, do you expect understanding from each other each time you express yourself individually?
Not That's not my first expectation that Hannah will understand. My first expectation is that Hannah will listen. And my second expectation is that she'll be curious. And my third is that she'll always be honest in what she then says. So she'll listen, be curious, maybe ask some questions, and then she will honestly let me know whatever's going on for her. I find all of that I relax myself with all of that.
Say what he said. Same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair. You said honest, and we may, I may want us to do a session on truth. The issue keeps coming up, and I was reading about it maybe in this Ram Dass book that we discussed last week. I think he was using the term truth, and I just replace it with honest. Yeah, he did, because his guru would say, Ram, love everyone and tell the truth. Just don't align with the truth thing, but be honest is what I extrapolate out of the story that he then tells. So that may be an upcoming, I think that's worth some more discussion, but maybe not now.
Yeah, I agree. It's worth a conversation, because to me, this is the foundation of a healthy relationship. Is if I don't believe that Hannah's being honest, we I've really complicated my life and our relationship.
Yeah, I want to talk more, but I want to stick on the questions here. Lynn says, I hear Jake's encouraging to be genuinely curious about another's experience, which creates space for connecting with another. Generally be Yes, and I've helped myself in also questioning with people, am I genuinely curious or not? Sometimes I realize I'm not, and I just let them have their story and go their merry way. Where in the past, and trying to people please, fawn, whatever, I probably still would address it. Now I hope I strive to be more sober in questioning, am I curious? Sometimes I'm not, but if I am, then then I am.
And that's just really acknowledging that you're allowing them to be them. And you may not agree and you can go your merry way, but, you know, let that person be themselves.
Christy says, yes, most volatility, I guess, is due to relationship. The closer the bond, the higher the potential for volatility, simply because we care more. I'll let you speak to that. Again, I don't know the percentage of your counseling, you guys, but I'm to understand the majority of it was with marriages specifically, but those intimate relationships, um, they do
Yeah,
seem to be the crucible, the primary one.
it was probably about half and half in terms of my practice. But the would you read the comment again?
Well, she said most volatility, I guess, is due to relationship. And the closer the bond, the higher the potential for volatility,
Right,
simply because we care more. To me, that feeds into the relationships are hard,
right,
which you don't align with.
right. So that. that comment to me is an example of a belief that we have adopted that I think isn't particularly helpful. The closer the bond, the more likely that we'll be reactive and volatile. I think it's about the quality of the bond, not the degree of closeness. And the quality of the bond changes when we go into OS3 compared to OS2. So, I mean, Hannah and I have a remarkably close bond and incredibly low reactivity. But it's because we're living in this orientation. And we weren't always. There was a time when we were in OS2. And then I would agree with your comment. Then we were very close and we were reactive because we felt that the other one could threaten us. We didn't have a clear line in terms of who's controlling my nervous system. Is Hannah controlling it or am I controlling it? It wasn't clear when we lived in OS2. And we knew a lot. We had a lot of good skills, but we still were in an orientation and we were using a language that was stimulating the primitive centers of our brain. And I've said this before, and I'll certainly say it again in the future. But when we activate the primitive centers of our brain, we're just limiting our potential. I'm limiting my potential for deep connection. I'm limiting my potential to make myself feel secure and safe. I'm limiting my creativity. I'm not even creative. I can't even find alternative ways to interpret something because I'm so attached to one idea. So I would just encourage all of us not to hold on too tightly to these beliefs, these adages, these memes that um, being close means we will have a volatile relationship or have more volatility. Relationships are hard work. It's natural that my partner is going to push my buttons, and that's an opportunity for me to grow. I don't believe any of these are the truth. I believe that they are expectations we have that are not serving us well.
You you said using the language. Um, I I can't the power that I see that I feel in using the language that we refer to as a language of personal agency. It using it correctly, I just increase my personal agency when I go out into OS2 language, objective language, fixed language. I find myself just decreasing my personal agency and causing very possible disconnect with somebody. And yeah, Christy, to what you talked about, that was my past. The closer the relationship, the more intimate, the more of my personal agency I gave to that person, to that story. Go back to the story. My personal agency I gave to the story of our family, the picture I had created. And uh, maybe a lot of things I would have done, but I would have done them in a better spirit, and I would have done them outside of a threat physiology, more in safety, as I retained my personal agency. But yeah, I gave my personal agency over. If I was doing that today, I'd be giving it to Jake and Hannah. I mean, we spend a lot of time together. We're doing something that we are investing a lot in, and they would have my personal agency. And I think that's why I give myself so much peace right now. It's not there, but I care a lot, but I don't feel an ounce of threat. They're putting more questions in here. Lynn says, I appreciate Hannah's comment, allowing them to be themselves. I realized how that I realize that's how I prefer to be treated also.
Right.
Christy says, I love that phraseology, the quality of the bond. I concur. I can see the difference in those two. Yasmin says, not reacting feels so good. And CB, not taking things personal. One of the four agreements means not giving away personal agency. Yeah, the four agreements referring to Don Miguel Ruiz's book.
And this is a great example that what's in that book, not taking things personally, I just think that's right on. Absolutely. Then we come to the how to. So I read that book and I go, this is great. I'm not going to take things personally. And then I start using and hearing other people speaking in the illusion of objective language. It's not really objective, but it sounds like people are telling me the way things are. And now my primitive brain is activated, and it's very hard for me not to take things personally. And so I just encourage all of you listening to remember that the practice is the language. And some people are saying, well, the language is awkward or it's difficult. And I want to challenge even that idea. The language is, I had a line in the article I wrote where I said the awkwardness is not a flaw, it's a feature. And what I meant by that is, to use the language of personal agency, I have to slow down. I have to slow down. I have to reorient and think, am I talking about you, or am I talking about my projection of you? Am I accusing you of making me feel a certain way, or am I acknowledging that I am making myself feel a certain way? So I have to sort these things out, because this is not how I grew up. I grew up thinking a particular way in OS2. Now I have to slow down. That's one of the keys to using the language of personal agency, slowing down, which I wake myself up. And I then take ownership, which is an empowering experience for me, which further calms me down. I further calm myself down. And all of this minimizes the likelihood that the other person will get defensive, because I'm never going to tell the other person about him or her. I'm just going to talk about my experience, my perceptions, my interpretations. So I just want to reinforce how central the language is to what we're talking about. I don't think it's really possible to, maybe it is, I don't know. I was going to say, I don't think it's possible to attain this level, this depth of connection and lack of reactivity without using the language of personal agency. Yeah, I don't know.
I agree. I'm again probably worth another complete a session just to talk about the language and how to speak it, because I do hear that the language is awkward. I find myself using it even on a podcast that many thousands of people are going to listen to, and I've got a guest in front of me, some Ivy League professor or psychologist or whatever, and I will say, instead of, oh, that's exciting, I'll just say, gosh, I really excite myself with that, and then I go on talking. I have not yet had anyone go, whoa, 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 wait, what did you say? That was really weird. They don't
Yeah.
even catch it.
Yeah.
And is it cumbersome? I remind myself, I think it was Dr. William Davis. He wrote the book. He got a few books, but one is Undoctored. And in that, he's telling somebody about eating healthy food, and they say, "Oh, you want me to eat extreme? You're one of those, health nut people." And he says, "No, I want you to realize that the way we eat today, fast food, processed food, that's extreme for the span of humanity." I'm just kind of bringing you back to what we used to be with. Now, I don't know if we used to speak more subjectively, but I look at it now and feel for myself, this is Kevin's term. This isn't the sage. We don't have this in writing, but I feel like I want to speak in a way that's honest to me, to owning my personal agency. And pretty much 99% of anything I'm going to say is totally subjective. It's not proven. It's not fact. It's just my perspective, my story, my interpretation. So I'm going to speak it in that way. As I do, I really comfort myself. I increase my personal agency. And what I realize is I almost eradicate the opportunity for uh, disagreement or contention, and greatly increase my probability of connecting. And that's what I am experiencing. I kind of like that thing. If I speak the language, the sage language of personal agency, and own everything I say, I find myself saying everything in a way that you just can't disagree with, because I'm owning it all. The only thing that's left really is to either, it's generally curiosity, um, but not contention. Yeah. Celeste, CB is Celeste. She says, also, I let go of believing others are treating me any kind of way.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right on.
beautiful. Yeah. Others are doing their thing, and whatever they're doing is a statement about them. It's not a statement about you.
I want to say in close relationships, when you have a life partner, there's certain agreements that you need to make, agreements that you need to have, like monogamy or whatever your lifestyle is. Um, those need to be the base that you're not going to be arguing about. And that's all I need to say about that.
Well, this goes to one of our ideas about relationships that you have. There's a belief that when you get together with somebody, you get together with somebody whose style is very different in the world, and you kind of balance each other out. We've always believed that it's easier to connect with someone who has a similar style and similar values. And that, I think that's kind of what Hannah's referring to. It means that you have these shared values and you make shared agreements. That is a reality in terms of um, reducing tension and conflict. To be with somebody where you have completely different styles and you have totally different values, and then you're using the language of personal agency, it would reduce the conflict and tension, but the relationship is still probably going to be a little rocky.
Right.
So we really feel that our similarities have made it easier for us to have harmony in our life together. Right. I want to go back because I don't know if it was Mary or Lynn, I'm not sure who asked the question about when I referred to Kevin as living in an illusion. Somebody questioned that. I don't think my answer was terribly clear, so I'm just sort of checking in. Whoever asked that question, did my answer satisfy you? And if not, we have a few minutes left to address that. And maybe Kevin can address it better than I can.
Well, as you said that, I thought, I mean, what I hold to with with Sage, with the Sage orientation, is that yes, I do live in an illusion. I always have, and I believe I always will. I'm just now conscious of it.
Yeah.
And thus I get to steer it.
Right.
And the illusion that I had in the past was that my self-worth, my identity relied on all the stuff that I was doing. That was the essence of me. I was the hero. I was Superman. That was it. I wish I could have popped that illusion a long time ago. Now, I still would have had 9 kids in the house and whatnot. It would have very much, I would have changed. I would have changed my experience. And I would have changed a lot of what I did. I just, the things that I did to uphold that illusion did not serve me well ultimately. And I think in a lot of ways it didn't serve the kids well. I think I've mentioned this before. I had a daughter one time who was sharing a frustration, and she stopped as she's probably watching me start to gear up, and she said, Dad, don't do anything. If you do, I won't learn how to take care of it. Son of a gun, what have I created here? Um, but with the illusion, yeah, I had an unconscious illusion. Now I get to have a conscious illusion.
Yeah, I appreciate that distinction. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, he put the term out. If anybody wants more clarity on that, okay, Etienne, thanks. Glad to have you here. I appreciate you being here. I said I have a question about honesty. What if someone shares something with you that is a conclusion of a powerful inner story that contains a lot of unhelpful patterns? So the person, uh, I don't. Let me. He keeps going here. As they can be in that moment, they're not as honest as they could be in that moment if they don't realize how that story is loaded with defenses. How would you respond if you heard this? So at the end of my understanding, so how somebody is in their story being honest, but you perceive um, a lot of defensiveness within that. Tell me if I got that. If I got. Oh, he says yes.
Yeah. So this is where we make this distinction about not validating people. So someone tells you a story, they say, I had a very difficult childhood, and because of that, and I was abandoned 4 or 5 times by key people in my life, and because of that, I have a hard time getting close to people. So is that person being honest? Yeah, that is that person's experience. But is that the truth? Going to Kevin's distinction between truth and honesty, we wouldn't say that's the truth. We would just say that's one person's interpretation of a series of events.
Yeah.
So we don't want to validate that and go, oh, yeah, you know, it makes sense that you can't have a relationship today because of your history. I get it. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is be respectful and understand that that is the person's experience. And if they're open, I also want to introduce different ways of interpreting that exact situation. Are there other ways that all of this could be interpreted? Are there other ways to make sense of it? Are there other things that you could do with the same exact history that you've had if you looked at it, I would say, a little differently? And what I really mean is by taking more responsibility for how you're going to choose to respond to all these things that happened. And the way you tell the story about your past determines how many choices you have going forward. You can tell the story in a way where you limit your choices because you give your power away, or you can tell the same story in a way where you empower yourself and you retain choice. And that is really our intention, that you retain choice and agency.
Yeah. I that topic of truth, I think, is worth us giving more focus. I like honesty, being honest, and as you said, Jake, realizing, Etienne, what you're talking about, somebody is being honest with you, and I can address, gosh, I hear your authentic honesty about your story. Now, it's difficult. A lot of people, especially those in threat physiology, take that as an offense. Like, "Oh, how dare you um, say it's a story?" I don't have a great. If you've got somebody like that and they're in threat physiology, then uh, for me, I'm kind of done. I'm not going to make it an effort at that point. What, Jake?
That's where we start off, and oftentimes saying, are you curious about other ways to make sense of what happened?
Hmm.
And if the person goes, no, I mean, what happened happened, then there's not a lot of room to move forward. But if the other person says, what are you talking about? I mean, that is what happened. Then we would typically give an example that where it's easy to see an event happened and people have multiple interpretations. And then I would take that and go back to their situation and say, you realize people can have different interpretations of the same event. So are there other ways to interpret what happened to you that would be more constructive? And would you like to look for those?
And is your interpretation serving you well?
Yeah, right. Right.
That's to me, it's the rubber hits the road with that, and I again, I've had a lot of opportunity to practice this acutely and to question when someone offers their honest story and is not curious about mine. What am I going to do with that? Do I just let it go? I've been practicing just letting it go and letting them have their process and see. And I've had pretty great results so far, according to how I interpret it. But if it's someone are you're very concerned about and care about deeply and want to know, I guess you can offer that up. Just like Jake said, are you interested to hear? Could it be interpreted any differently? Is that an absolute fact? I mean, you just got to discern how you're going to address that. And even I've even found myself asking, probably with I'm trying to think who I remember recently. I think with a kid of going, "Hey, can you? I really would like to hear." They understand Sage. I'd like to hear how you interpreted that. And I asked, and those who know me well can sometimes would do well to ask me, Kevin, are you being honest with your interpretation? Because I can sometimes still hedge on that in my past programming of fawning, people pleasing, and can sometimes use a reminder on that as well.
And I think the key distinction, Etienne, around honesty is it subjective honesty or objective honesty? Because a lot
Mm.
of times when people are in OS2, they think that their honesty is objectively the truth. And that's where I think that we limit ourselves when we do that. If I realize that my honesty is a subjective statement, this is just my experience, then I find that people are more flexible and it's easier for them to adapt. It's easier for them to question their own story.
I mean, that right there that's where if I could paint a picture, we're in a room with 10,000 people and we get to drop fairy dust from the sky that pops that illusion of our experience of life is reality. And if we can pop that, I envision everybody's eyes opening like mine did, like I did with mine, and going, holy crap, are you serious? I'm looking around and this is just all, I'm making this up. This is my story without invalidating it necessarily, but going, gosh, and somebody else is having a different experience. And to come together with that is, to me, I have reoriented my life. Mary says, Jake, you did answer my question. And I like how you talked about the illusion blocked you from being curious enough to listen to offer room or space for the other person's version of the story.
Right.
Yeah. All right. We may come back and talk about honesty, truth. But I do like that this got into your guys' relationship. It's very, that would be a relevant one for all you listening. On relationships are hard. Marriage is hard. And you've got two people on the screen here together that don't align with that. And I have gotten to experience them intimately for a long time and in their home and out. And it's not because of all the reasons you might put in there to discount the possibility that maybe relationships don't have to be hard, but I think we harden them with these illusions, these unconscious illusions.
Right.
All right. Yasmin says, thank you. Etienne says, thank you. I love your answers. Well, hey, thank you guys. Gosh, this is, I really enjoyed the interactions here. Thanks for being with us. Jake and Hannah, thanks
Great
for
as
being.
always. Thank you all for joining us.
Yes,
Thank you,
thanks.
Kevin.
Yep. Thanks, guys.